Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of your sources and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge to shortcut you to being truly well-informed. Today, we're diving into a fascinating area that touches literally every aspect of our lives: how we learn. It's not just about what subject you choose to study, but how you engage with that material that makes all the difference in reaching true mastery.
That's right. Our compass for this deep dive is The Science of Rapid Skill Acquisition, Advanced Methods, a compelling work published back in 2019 by Peter Hollins. Hollins is, well, he's known for his practical, really actionable guides on things like self-improvement, productivity, and learning. And this book, it truly distills years of research and experience into a potent blueprint. It's a deep look at not just what to learn, but fundamentally how to learn it optimally and quickly, challenging, many of our conventional understandings of education and personal growth.
Hollins kicks things off with a very relatable story from his own childhood about learning piano. He talks about playing for a full 7 years, taking lessons diligently, yet he describes himself as just, average compared to other kids.
Right.
He specifically remembers a friend who started lessons at the exact same time but progressed far more quickly. It seemed almost effortless for the friend. Looking back, Hollins figures his own stagnation wasn't necessarily a lack of talent. He wasn't tone deaf or anything, but more a severe lack of patience and focus. He remembers being distracted, summer days, friends out on their bikes instead of sitting inside practicing scales. Meanwhile, his friend's really quick progress was clearly linked to a far more regimented approach in practice, rehearsal, and discipline. It really paints a vivid picture of a missed opportunity for him, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This personal story, it really sets the stage for the entire book. And it immediately highlights Hollins' core idea that raw talent isn't the sole, or maybe even the primary, factor in how fast you learn or how good you eventually get. In fact, he argues we're living in a time of just unprecedented information access. Think about it: cheap or even free tutorials, instant knowledge online for pretty much any skill you can imagine. This accessibility should make it easier than ever to pick up skills and really change our lives.
Right, you'd think so.
Yet, so many of us struggle. Why? Hollins points a finger at our traditional education models. He describes how we were mostly taught to learn passively, just memorize and regurgitate stuff for tests.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Rather than to truly synthesize it, understand the nuances, and, crucially, apply that knowledge in a practical, impactful way. So maybe paradoxically, the old school system might actually be holding us back from truly leveraging the information age.
That's a powerful thought, maybe a bit unsettling too. So this deep dive is all about understanding the blueprint Hollins lays out for accelerated learning. It's about moving beyond just consuming information to actively shaping your capabilities and ultimately your future. We'll explore the strategic methods, the effective practice techniques, the deeper comprehension tools, and even the crucial environmental and mindset shifts that can fundamentally transform how you acquire new skills. It's about taking ownership, really.
Exactly. Taking proactive ownership of your learning journey and recognizing its transformative power.
Okay, let's unpack this core idea then. That rapid skill acquisition can fundamentally change your life. Hollins suggests that learning isn't just about picking up new hobbies for fun or, collecting degrees. It's the profound ability to truly change your circumstances from top to bottom, to quite literally rewrite your personal story.
Exactly. He gives this incredibly vivid and, frankly, inspiring example of a friend. After a divorce, 10 years without a job, she was in a really tough spot. No marketable skills, no money for formal classes. So she taught herself to make custom jewelry.
Just like that.
Well, not just like that. It took 5 years of dedicated self-directed practice, learning from online videos, trial and error, sheer persistence. But what's remarkable is that through this self-learning, she not only launched a successful business, but she was able to buy her own home just 3 years after starting it.
That's incredible.
It really is. This story powerfully illustrates how self-learning, activating your self-will, taking complete ownership, it directly translates to a more satisfying life. It's about turning abstract knowledge into concrete, practical change that impacts your well-being, your independence. It's the ultimate form of self-empowerment, really.
That's a truly inspiring transformation, going from vulnerability to self-sufficiency purely through learned skills. Okay, so if learning is that powerful, how do you decide what to learn? Hollins suggests that while some learning can definitely be for learning's sake, pure curiosity, which is great, if you want to optimize your time, your energy, you should focus on skills that matter most. What does that actually mean for us, practically speaking?
Well, what's fascinating here is how he breaks down the decision-making process. It's not about what sounds impressive on a resume, but what truly aligns with your goals and leverages your unique situation. He recommends picking skills that can.
Okay.
First, boost your bankability. Pretty straightforward. Can the skill directly increase your financial value, your earning potential?
Like learning coding or data analysis.
Exactly. Or maybe a new language for a global role.
Yeah.
But it's not only about money. Could it provide significant value in another way? Like learning advanced home repairs saves you money, makes you more self-reliant. It's about tangible benefit aligned with your values.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, capitalize on your natural talent. If you have an innate knack for something or just really enjoy it, that can seriously speed up learning and make it more satisfying. You'll stick with it longer.
Because it feels less like work.
Right. And mastery comes quicker when you're working with your natural grain. This also ties directly into skill stacking, which we'll get into later. Even being just pretty good at something you're naturally inclined towards can be powerful when combined with other skills.
Interesting. Okay, third.
Third, leverage available opportunities. Look around. What does your current social or work situation make easy to learn? Maybe your company pays for certifications.
Or a friend could mentor you.
Exactly. Or you have access to specific tools or resources. It's about recognizing and grabbing that low-hanging fruit opportunities that reduce friction and cost.
Smart. And the last one.
Fourth, adapt to life situations. Big life changes often force us to learn new things, right?
Yeah, like budgeting after a layoff or cooking when you have kids.
Or learning about fitness after a health scare. Holland says, welcome these moments. Don't resist them. See them as powerful opportunities for growth. They become catalysts, turning adaptation into new strength.
That's a powerful framework, shifting from just passive interest to really strategic intent in choosing what to learn. So this leads us nicely into understanding the journey itself. Holland outlines 4 stages of learning. He says these are crucial for setting realistic expectations and, maybe more importantly, for not getting discouraged and quitting.
Absolutely. Because many of us might be stuck in those early stages without realizing why we're struggling.
Which leads to giving up too soon. So what are these stages? How can they help us map our progress?
It really raises that key question for any skill you're learning. Where are you right now? Understanding these stages gives you a map.
Okay, stage 1.
Unconscious incompetence. This is where you don't even know what you don't know.
Ignorance is bliss, sort of.
Kind of. Using the piano example again, you might know what a piano looks like, what it sounds like maybe, but you have zero idea how to read music, move your fingers correctly, anything about theory. You don't grasp the sheer number of subskills involved. You might not even be sure you want to learn it long term.
Right. Totally clueless about the depth. What's next?
Conscious incompetence. Now the fog starts to lift a bit. You know what you don't know, but you still can't do much about it easily.
It sounds like the frustrating part.
It often is. You're aware of the gaps, you make mistakes, and you know you're making them. For the piano, you probably know the notes now, maybe some basic scales, understand time signatures. But playing anything complex is slow, painful. Rachmaninoff is still way off. You're very aware of your shortcomings.
Okay, so you know you're bad, basically. Then comes
Conscious competence, stage 3. Here, you know how to succeed, but it still takes real effort and focus. You've reached a decent level of proficiency.
You're getting there.
You probably have a regular practice routine. You're learning more complex theory, maybe recognizing some tunes by ear. But muscle memory isn't fully there for the really fast stuff, and you likely still need sheet music for harder pieces. You know your effort is paying off, you see results, but it's not effortless yet.
Okay, competent but requires concentration. And the final stage?
Unconscious competence. This is mastery, the peak. You can succeed without even thinking about it.
Like it's second nature.
Exactly. Years of practice mean your fingers just know what to do. Speed, precision, expression. You can play by ear, improvise, memorize quickly. You almost disappear into the instrument. This is the Carnegie Hall level. The skill feels totally intuitive, part of who you are.
Recognizing those stages is so helpful because that struggle in conscious incompetence, it's not failure, it's actually a sign of progress, right?
Precisely. Knowing that changes your whole emotional response to the difficulty. You expect it, you don't give up because it's hard, it normalizes the struggle.
Makes the whole process feel less daunting. Okay, so you know what you want to learn, you understand the stages, but how do you actually start tackling something that seems huge and overwhelming? Hollins introduces this idea of deconstruction. Sounds a bit technical, but you said it's actually quite intuitive.
Yeah, it's a really powerful strategy. Deconstruction is basically breaking down a big, intimidating skill into smaller, much more manageable sub-skill.
Makes it less scary psychologically.
Definitely. That's a huge benefit. Just knowing where to start is half the battle.
Yeah.
But more importantly, deconstruction helps you apply the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle.
Right. The idea that 20% of the effort gives 80% of the results.
Exactly. So you identify the vital 20% of subskills within that larger skill that will actually give you 80% of the desired outcome. It's about finding the leverage points, focusing your energy where it counts the most, instead of trying to learn everything equally.
So, like with cooking, you wouldn't need to master every single French technique initially.
Probably not. Maybe just mastering 20 core techniques, knife skills, sautéing, roasting, basic sauces gives you 80% of the versatility you actually need for everyday cooking.
That sounds way more efficient, almost like a learning hack. Can you give us another really concrete example? Maybe something lots of people try.
Absolutely. Language learning is a perfect one. Gabriel Weiner, he's a well-known polyglot, suggests focusing intensely on the 1,000 most common words first when you start a new language.
Just 1,000 words.
Yeah. He claims knowing just those 1,000 words lets you understand roughly 70% of an average text. Think about that efficiency. You're not learning obscure flower names, you're learning the core vocabulary.
Wow, 70% is huge.
It is. And Dr. Paul Nation showed this incredible imbalance in English, too. Just 10 super common words like the, be, of, and, a make up nearly 25% of everything we say or write.
A quarter from just 10 words.
Astonishing, right? Get to 100 common words, and you recognize almost half the content in any sentence. And another expert, Dr. Alexander Ogwells, says you only need about 2,500 words to express basically anything you want, even if it's a bit awkwardly phrased sometimes.
So the takeaway is focus on the high-frequency stuff first.
Exactly. Focus on those high-impact sub-skills. You get much further, much faster, and avoid that initial overwhelm and burnout. You build momentum.
That's a massive shift from trying to boil the ocean right at the start. Okay, what about how we actually take in information? Hollins talks about mixing styles and mediums, but he also busts some pretty common myths about learning styles, right? Things many of us were taught in school.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really interesting because it challenges a lot of what we think we know about learning. Hollins is very clear. Many popular learning styles ideas, like that learning pyramid with fixed percentages.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Lectures are 5%, teaching others is 90%.
Right. Or the whole left brain, right brain thing, logical versus creative. He says the science just doesn't back them up as rigid categories for people. The key takeaway isn't that you have a visual brain and need diagrams. It's that information is simply information, no matter how it is presented.
So the format doesn't inherently matter as much as we think.
What matters most, he argues, is how focused you are and how much attention you give. If reading a textbook makes your mind wander constantly, but listening to an audio lesson on the same topic keeps you totally engaged,
then the audio lesson is better for you.
Exactly. Not because you're inherently an auditory learner in some fixed neurological sense, but because that specific medium helps you maintain focus and engagement better in that context. It's about finding what holds your attention.
So it's less about universal scientific truth and more about personal effectiveness. Find what keeps you dialed in. Oh, okay. So what are some of the models or approaches he suggests we experiment with? Not as rigid labels, but as tools to understand our preferences.
He presents the Solomon Felder Index of Learning Styles exactly like that, as a set of useful tools, different lenses to understand your preferences, which can then guide your choices. It includes dimensions like sensing versus intuitive. This is about how you prefer to process information. Sensing types are detail-oriented, practical, like procedures, focus on facts.
Step by step, people.
Right. Intuitive types are more big-picture thinkers. They look for connections, possibilities, the overall goal. Might miss details, but grasp the concept quickly.
Then there's the classic VAK.
Yeah, visual versus auditory versus read-writer versus kinesthetic. This is about how information is best presented or interacted with. Visual learners like charts, demos. Auditory learners prefer listening. Read-writers like text, taking notes. Kinesthetic learners need movement, hands-on practice, drawing, physical activity. Again, it's about recognizing your preference and leaning into it.
Got it. And the last pair.
Sequential versus global. This is about how you prefer to structure the learning path. Sequential learners need order, a logical step-by-step progression.
Like building blocks.
Exactly. A global learner might jump around, learn things seemingly out of order, connect disparate ideas later. They somehow get it eventually, often seeing the big picture before all the pieces are clear.
Okay, so these are ways to think about how you engage best. What about that learning pyramid again? You said it's scientifically shaky, but still useful conceptually.
Right. Despite the specific percentages being disputed, the pyramid's underlying message about passive versus active learning is incredibly powerful and generally supported.
Passive being like lectures and reading.
Yes. Those methods where you're just receiving information tend to lead to lower retention. Lectures, maybe 5% according to the pyramid. Reading, 10%. This is where a lot of traditional schooling stops.
And active methods.
Active methods involve doing something with the information. Group discussion, pyramid suggests 50% retention, forces you to articulate ideas, debate, clarify. Practice by doing 75% is getting hands-on, applying the skill. And the most potent, according to the pyramid, is teaching others. A huge 90%.
Why is teaching so effective?
Because it forces you to organize your thoughts, explain things clearly, identify your own gaps in understanding in real time, and simplify complex ideas. You can't teach what you don't truly understand.
Okay, so if we take a skill like photography, applying this active learning idea means moving beyond just reading the manual.
Absolutely. Reading the manual is passive. Watching demonstration videos is better, visual. Discussing composition with other photographers, group discussion, is even better. Actually going out, taking photos, experimenting, practice by doing is crucial. And then trying to teach a friend how to use their camera. That forces the deepest level of understanding.
Or like learning to make sushi.
Same idea. Start with cookbooks, maybe watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi, passive visual. But then take a hands-on class, practice by doing. Discuss techniques with classmates, group discussion. And finally, try teaching your friends how to make a California roll, teaching others. You're actively engaging different learning pathways.
Combining different mediums and methods to maximize retention. That makes sense. Now, this idea of a comprehensive approach, it doesn't just apply to hands-on skills, but also to research itself, right? Which is a skill on its own. How does Holland suggest we tackle gathering and filtering information effectively?
Yes, research is foundational. He lays out a really structured 4-step process to cut through the noise and build solid understanding.
Okay, step 1.
Open the floodgates. Initially, don't filter. Just gather everything you can find from diverse sources. Aim for a wide, panoramic view. Expect to be confused. At first, that's normal, even good. It means you're seeing the complexity. Quantity over quality at this stage.
Get it all on the table first, then what?
Step 2, filter your sources. Now you get critical. Separate the good from the bad. Good sources use data, evidence, careful reasoning. Bad sources rely on emotion, hyperbole, dodgy data, maybe just anecdotes.
Right, anecdote isn't data.
Exactly. You'll start seeing patterns. Majority views, minority views, maybe some crackpot stuff. This filtering step can slash your material way down, maybe 75% or more, removing the noise.
Okay, filter down. Step 3.
Look for patterns and overlap. As you review the good stuff, you'll see recurring themes, arguments, ideas. Identify the primary points, secondary points, the boundaries of the topic. Build connections between related concepts. Holland warns, if only one source makes a claim, be skeptical, even if it has followers. It might not be true or important. You should start seeing a coherent structure emerge.
Makes sense. Find the consensus in the main threads. And the final step.
Step 4. Seek dissenting opinions. This is crucial to fight confirmation bias, our tendency to only look for stuff that agrees with us.
So actively look for arguments against your emerging view.
Yes. Play devil's advocate with yourself. You need to understand the strongest counter-arguments to have a truly complete, nuanced picture and to really test your own understanding. Otherwise, you're just living in an echo chamber.
That's a tough but necessary step. So after all that, what's the goal? How do you know you've done enough research?
The goal is to be able to summarize your understanding succinctly, but with nuance. He suggests a specific format as a test. X, Y, and Z are true because. However, A, B, and C are also relevant because.
So state the main points and reasons, but also the counterpoints and their reasons.
Exactly. If you can do that clearly and confidently, you've likely built a solid foundation. If not, you need to go back and revisit the steps. This rigorous research approach is key before you dive into heavy practice, ensuring your efforts are built on solid ground.
Okay, we've covered the strategic planning, what to learn, how to break it down, how to research it. Now let's talk about the actual practice, the doing part, and how it's often misunderstood. Holland says something pretty stark. True practice is difficult, tedious, and painful. How does he differentiate that from just, repeating something over and over?
It's a critical difference. He calls it deliberate practice. This isn't just mindless repetition. It's purposeful, systematic, intensely focused work aimed specifically at improving overall performance.
not just going through the motions.
Exactly. Our brains want to turn repeated actions into unconscious habits that's efficient, but deliberate practice ensures those habits are the right ones, optimized and correct. It means consciously identifying your weakest points, the specific things you struggle with, and drilling those relentlessly with full attention until they're mastered.
So it's about pushing into the uncomfortable zone.
Precisely. It demands focus and pushes you right to the edge of your current abilities. It's often not fun, hence the difficult, tedious, and painful description.
That sounds intense. Can you give us a concrete example, someone actually doing deliberate practice?
A great example comes from Cal Newport, the computer science professor. He described how he mastered discrete mathematics as an undergrad, a subject full of abstract proofs.
Okay, how'd he do it?
He didn't just read the book. He'd get stacks of blank paper. In class, he'd copy down each new proposition from the professor. Then later, on his own, he'd try to solve the proofs from scratch.
Without looking at the answer.
Right. If he got stuck on a concept, he didn't skip it. He'd hit the textbooks, look online. If still stuck, he'd ask the professor for specific feedback on where his logic failed.
Okay, identifying the exact sticking point.
Exactly. By the end, he had this huge stack of handwritten proofs. He then aggressively reviewed them, sorting them into ones he knew cold and ones that were still shaky. He drilled the shaky ones over and over until he understood every single step.
Wow, that's dedication.
It is. And the result? Highest grade in the class? That's deliberate practice. Relentless focus on weaknesses, persistent effort, using targeted feedback to refine understanding.
So it's really about confronting what you don't know, not just reinforcing what you do know. What else is important about structuring practice sessions? Is it just about being intense?
Intensity matters, but Hollins also warns against mindless activity and motion for motion's sake. Just logging hours isn't the point. Quality over quantity.
Don't burn out, but get in the zone.
Right. Find that state of focused flow. And here's the critical insight. Muscle memory sees what it sees. It doesn't judge good practice from bad. It just reinforces whatever you do.
So if you practice sloppily...
You build sloppy habits.
Yeah.
They become ingrained and harder to fix later. That's why he says perfect practice makes perfect skills. Precision and quality in every repetition matter hugely, and why getting immediate feedback is so valuable, it catches errors early.
Okay, so deliberate practice is key. But Hollins also introduces two other methods that seem counterintuitive but are apparently very effective: interleaved practice and spaced repetition. Let's start with interleaved practice. It challenges how most of us study, right?
It really does. Most people use block learning, study topic A for an hour, then topic B for an hour, then topic C. So AAA, BBB, CCC.
Yeah, that seems logical. Focus on one thing at a time.
Interleaved practice flips that. It mixes the practice of several related skills or topics within a single session. So your session looks more like ABC, ABC, ABC.
Give me an example.
An algebra student, instead of doing all exponents, then all graphing, then all radicals, they'd mix problems.
Yeah.
An exponent problem, then a graphing one, then a radical, then back to exponents, and so on, all within one study block.
Or studying Shakespeare.
You might read a bit from a comedy, then a tragedy, then a history play, then back to a comedy, all in one sitting, rather than reading all the comedies first.
That sounds a bit like multitasking, which we're always told is bad for focus.
That's a good point, but it's not multitasking in the usual sense. Multitasking is juggling unrelated things. Interleaving is switching between related topics.
Okay, so what's the benefit? Why scramble things up?
It pushes you out of your comfort zone. It breaks the pattern recognition that happens when you just do the same thing over and over. Most importantly, it forces active recall. When you switch topics, your brain has to actively retrieve the rules and methods for that new topic, rather than just coasting on short-term memory from the previous problem.
Makes your brain work harder to retrieve the info each time.
Exactly. And the research is pretty compelling. Studies show interleaving can boost learning and retention by as much as 43% compared to block learning. Plus, seeing related topics side by side can create deeper connections and understanding.
43% is a massive gain. Okay, that's interleaving. What about spaced repetition? This sounds powerful too, especially for long-term memory.
It is incredibly effective and, again, counterintuitive to our instinct to cram. Spaced repetition, or distributed practice, just means spacing out your exposure to information over the longest period possible. Don't do it all at once.
So little and often is better than one big session.
That's the core message. Hollins puts it bluntly. 5 minutes a day is far superior to learning and memory than an hour a week. It's about the frequency of exposure, not necessarily the duration of any single session.
Why is cramming so bad then? We all did it for exams.
Cramming pushes info into short-term memory, maybe long enough for the test, but it rarely sticks long-term without repeated exposure over time, allowing your brain to consolidate those memories. Spaced repetition builds those strong neural pathways gradually. Each revisit strengthens the trace.
He gives a concrete schedule example, right, for Spanish history.
Yeah, a very practical one. Instead of one long slog, you'd maybe learn some facts Monday morning, review them Monday night, say 20 minutes. Tuesday morning, try active recall first, then review 15 minutes. Tuesday night, quick review, 10 minutes. Wednesday, active recall, 10 minutes.
And so on.
Right. Over the week, you might only spend an extra 75 minutes total, but you've revisited the material maybe 6 additional times in these short, focused bursts. That consistent, frequent retrieval pushes it into long-term memory. The key metric isn't hours spent, it's revisits or retrieval attempts.
Measure revisits, not hours. Got it. Okay, the final practice method he talks about is problem-based learning, or PBL. You said this is something we might do intuitively.
We often do, yeah. PBL has roots way back with John Dewey's learning by doing.
Yeah.
But it really took off in medical schools in the 60s. They stopped just making students memorize facts about diseases.
What did they do instead?
They gave them real cases, like a 66-year-old male patient presents with shortness of breath. The problem drives the learning. Students have to figure out, what questions do I ask? What history is relevant? What tests should I run? What do the results mean? How do I create a treatment plan?
So the facts become meaningful because they're needed to solve the problem.
Exactly. It makes learning highly relevant, engaging, and much more likely to stick because you're applying it immediately to a real-world scenario.
So the problem is the engine for learning. How can we use this powerful idea in everyday life outside of medicine?
Hollins gives 2 great relatable examples.
Like what?
Kitchen proficiency. Want to get better at cooking. Don't just aim to learn recipes. Define the problem as mealtime chaos.
Yeah. I know that problem.
Right. That immediate practical problem forces you to learn. You know your family needs food, which you know. You need specific recipes, meal plans, maybe better knife skills, what you need to know. The act of planning and cooking meals becomes the learning process because you're solving a tangible problem daily.
It makes the learning urgent. What's the other example?
Broken toaster. Your toaster breaks? You want to learn basic electronics, define the problem, fix the toaster. This forces you to figure out what's wrong, research how to fix it, videos, manuals, maybe get some tools, and then actually do the repair. By solving that one specific problem, you learn foundational electronic skills, troubleshooting, practical application stuff a textbook alone can't teach.
So the framework is define the problem, figure out what you know, what you need to know, find solutions, take action.
Exactly. PBL keeps you engaged, motivated, promotes deeper learning because you take ownership and put the pieces together yourself to get a real result. And as Hollins says, even if you fail initially, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. Failure becomes feedback.
Okay, practice is crucial. But truly understanding something deeply, being able to explain it, connect it, manipulate the ideas, that's another level. Hollins talks about methods for deep comprehension. The first one sounds intriguing. Elaborative interrogation. What's that about?
Elaborative interrogation is basically a systematic way of intensely questioning yourself about what you're learning. Think self-explanation, self-summarizing, but taken up a notch.
Like being your own annoying toddler, constantly asking why.
Pretty much. It's about developing that childlike inquiry. Constantly asking why and how stated facts are true, and forcing yourself to create explanations for everything. The goal is to uncover your blind spots, the things you don't realize you don't understand, where your knowledge is just superficial memorization.
So it pushes you beyond just recalling facts to understanding the underlying mechanics and connections. How would that work if you were, say, studying a complex historical event?
He uses the Great Depression as a great example. You wouldn't just read the dates and main events. You'd start with, what was it? Global economic collapse. Then immediately, what caused it? Stock crash, bank failures, tariffs, drought, etc.
Okay, listing the causes.
But then you don't stop there. You pick one cause, like the stock market crash, and you interrogate that. Why did it crash? Margin selling, speculation, etc. And pick one of those, like margin selling. What was margin selling? How did it work? Why was it a problem?
You keep drilling down with why and how.
Exactly. You keep asking deeper why questions until you hit a wall, until you can't provide a credible explanation anymore. That precise point shows you where your understanding ends, where the gap is. Then you go research that specific gap. You can apply this to anything, math problems, biology, literary themes. It forces you to build a robust mental model, not just a list of facts.
That sounds incredibly similar to the Feynman technique I've heard about. named after the physicist Richard Feynman. Is it related?
It is very much related.
Yeah.
The Feynman technique is another powerful tool for gauging your own comprehension through self-explanation. Feynman was nicknamed the Great Explainer because he could make incredibly complex physics understandable.
So how does his technique work? Is it simpler?
It's arguably even simpler with 4 clear steps. First, choose your concept. Pick anything you want to understand deeply, gravity, supply and demand, whatever. Second, explain it simply. Try to explain it as if you were talking to a child or someone totally unfamiliar with the topic. Use simple language. Avoid jargon. Focus on clarity. If your explanation gets long, confusing, or just falls apart.
That reveals your own gaps.
Exactly. That's why teaching is so powerful for learning. It forces you to confront what you don't know.
Right. Step 3.
Find your blind spots. Pinpoint exactly where your simple explanation got fuzzy or broke down. Whatever you couldn't explain clearly is a blind spot. Now go back to your sources. Research only those gaps until you can explain that specific part concisely, ideally in one sentence.
Fill the gaps, then try again.
Step 4. Refine and simplify. Try explaining the whole concept again, aiming for even more clarity and elegance. And crucially, use analogies. Being able to translate the core idea into different contexts, using analogies like gravity being a bowling ball on a trampoline, shows true understanding. It's a high watermark, demonstrating you can manipulate the knowledge flexibly.
So, the ultimate test. Can you explain it simply and clearly to anyone, maybe with a good analogy? Okay, what about Bloom's taxonomy? How does that fit into deep comprehension? Sounds more academic.
Bloom's taxonomy is another really useful framework, created by Benjamin Bloom, updated later. It outlines 6 levels of understanding, moving from basic recall to complex creation. It acts like a personal barometer. Are you trying to do high-level thinking without the foundation?
Okay, what are the levels?
It starts with remember, just recalling facts. Basic stuff, like historical dates.
Interpreting meaning, asking why and how. Grasping the context. This is where elaborative interrogation fits. Why did the revolution happen?
Using concepts in new situations. Applying lessons from one historical event to another. Putting knowledge into practice.
Breaking down information, finding connections, inferring causes, critiquing the decisions of historical figures, for example. Higher still is evaluate. Making judgments based on criteria, arguing whether a historical decision was right or wrong based on evidence, forming informed opinions. And the highest level is create, integrating knowledge to produce something entirely new, using historical lessons to devise a new plan or solution. This shows complete mastery.
And the key insight is?
Each level builds on the one before it. You can't understand if you can't remember. You can't apply if you don't understand. You can't evaluate effectively if you haven't analyzed. It helps you see if you're trying to jump too far ahead, maybe trying to critique something before you've properly analyzed or even understood it. It provides a roadmap for deepening knowledge systematically.
All these methods, interrogation, Feynman, Bloom, they sound like serious mental effort, hard work. How does Holland suggest we sustain that effort, especially when motivation flags, which it inevitably does?
He talks about flexing your curiosity muscle. Yes, deep comprehension can be tedious, but curiosity, he argues, can be your greatest weapon, your best motivator.
Curiosity makes it feel less like work.
Exactly. Think about it all. Human knowledge, from fire to relativity, started with someone being intensely curious. Why is the sky blue? How does this work? Curiosity drives you deep into the details without it feeling like a chore, and it's self-perpetuating. The more you learn, the more questions arise, the more you want to learn. It transforms obligation into a quest.
But what if you're just not naturally curious about a topic? Maybe it feels boring or intimidating or you're resistant. Can you cultivate curiosity?
He acknowledges it's not always automatic. Fear or anxiety about the unknown can block it. He mentions things like deprivation sensitivity, that uncomfortable feeling of not being in the know, which can actually motivate you to learn, or needing stress tolerance, pushing through initial discomfort.
So you don't have to be curious.
He says it's not strictly necessary. Pure discipline can work. But he strongly implies that cultivating curiosity sure makes it easier. It's the internal fuel that keeps you going when willpower runs dry. He suggests starting small. What's just one small thing about this that sparks my interest? Get the ball rolling.
Okay, so far we focused on mastering individual skills or topics. But then Holland shifts gears to talk about something called skill stacking. What's that about, and why is it so important today?
Skill stacking is really about differentiating yourself. In a world where basic skills are easier to acquire, just being good at one thing might not be enough. Hollins argues that aiming for the absolute top 1% in a single skill is statistically unlikely for most of us.
Right, becoming the world's best guitarist or programmer is a long shot.
Exactly. So the idea popularized by Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, is to instead aim for being really quite good, say top 5% to 15%, in multiple skills that work well together. It's about the unique combination.
So versatility and synergy over extreme specialization.
Precisely. Scott Adams is the perfect example. He admits he's not the world's best artist or funniest writer or sharpest business mind, but he's pretty good at all three. And combining his above-average drawing, humor, and business sense created Dilbert something unique and incredibly valuable. Few people have that specific mix.
That makes a lot of sense. The combination itself becomes rare.
Yeah, and there's data, too. A Boston Consulting Group study found companies with more diverse skill sets generated 19% more revenue. It's about creating your own unique value proposition that's hard for anyone else to replicate. Your personal Venn diagram of skills.
Okay, so how do we start building our own skill stack? Or even just identify the one we might already have without realizing it?
The cool thing is, you probably already have the beginnings of one. Step one is just identifying your existing skills that could work together towards a goal. He gives an example. Being a skilled draftsman is good for a painter.
But maybe not unique.
Right. But a skilled draftsman who also works in multiple mediums, oil, digital, etc., and has a great visual memory and knows a lot about art history or mythology, that combination, that trifecta, is rare and powerful. Each skill boosts the others.
It's like a software developer who's also great at public speaking and managing projects.
Exactly. Far more valuable than one who only codes brilliantly but can't communicate or lead.
He had a great example for a stockbroker too, right?
Yeah.
Showcasing specific combinations.
Yes, a brilliant illustration. Basic skills for a stockbroker are communication and calculation. Everyone has those. But what if you add a relevant foreign language, like Chinese or German?
Opens up global markets.
Instantly puts you ahead. Then what if you add deep knowledge in a specific high-growth sector, like biotech? Really understanding the science behind it.
Gives you an analytical edge.
Exactly. You don't have to be a master linguist or a PhD biologist, but being in the top 10-15% in those 3 or 4 related skills, communication, calculation, language, sector knowledge, makes you incredibly flexible, marketable. You create that unique niche nobody else quite fits. It exponentially multiplies your value.
Okay, skill stacking is powerful. Beyond our individual skills, Hollins really emphasizes the huge impact of our surroundings, both social and physical. It's not just about willpower. The environment shapes us profoundly.
It's a massive influence, often totally overlooked. Our social circles, they can make or break us. He cites this stunning New England Journal of Medicine study.
The obesity one.
Yeah, tracked over 12,000 people for 32 years. If a close friend became obese, your own chances increased by a staggering 171%.
Wow, 171%. That's unbelievable.
It shows the deep, often unconscious power of social contagion. The people around us set our norms, our expectations, our habits, whether we realize it or not.
That's genuinely startling. So given that huge influence, how do we consciously curate our social environment for learning instead of just letting it happen to us?
First, Hollins says declutter the negative. Identify the negative Nancy's people who drain your energy, discourage you, project their own fears onto your goals.
The you can't do that crowd.
Exactly. You might not be able to cut them out completely, but recognize their criticism often stems from their limitations, not yours. Learn to tune it out.
Okay, reduce the negative.
Actively seek positive influences. 3 key types.
Observe people you admire who have the skills you want. Don't just look at their success. Analyze their behaviors, routines, sacrifices. Try to infer their mindset values, drivers. Like Yo-Yo Ma starting cello at age 4 in a musical household environment shaped him. Learn from their journey.
Dissect their path.
Mentors. Look for mentors who learned from scratch, who struggled, not just the naturals. A 5'8" basketball player who made it is often a better mentor than a 7'2" giant because they had to work harder, develop deeper skills.
They understand the grind better.
Exactly. A good mentor spots flaws early, pushes you. If you can't find a formal one, create a personal board of directors, a few people you trust for advice.
Good idea. What's the third type?
Skill hotbeds collectives. Immerse yourself in environments where the skill thrives. He gives 2 great historical examples. The Florentine craft guilds during the Renaissance. Intense apprenticeships, shared standards, constant competition and collaboration. It bred incredible talent.
Total immersion.
And Brazilian futsal. That small ball, small field version of soccer forces, incredible precision, ball control, quick thinking. It's deeper practice. When those kids play on a regular field, they dominate. These groups create an environment where excellence is the baseline. Even the worst person there is way above average globally.
Being surrounded by that focus and skill just pulls you up. Okay, so social environment matters hugely. What about our physical space? How can we design our office, our home to support learning?
His key advice here: assume the absolute worst about your own self-discipline. Don't rely on willpower, it's flimsy. Design your environment to make good choices easy and bad choices hard.
Like that study about plate sizes, smaller plates mean eating less.
Exactly. Brian Wansink's study. People with 10-inch plates ate 22% less than those with 12-inch plates. Tiny change, big impact. Unconscious influence.
So how do we apply that?
Two main strategies: decreasing bad habits, out of sight, out of mind. Make temptations inconvenient. Hide unhealthy snacks. Put the distracting dartboard away. Remove ashtrays if you want to quit smoking. Use a standing desk or move chairs to avoid sitting all day. Increase the activation energy for bad habits.
Make them harder to start.
Increasing good habits within arm's reach. Make desirable actions effortless. Put your guitar in the middle of the room, ready to play. Leave sheet music where you have to pick it up. Put your gym bag by the door. Keep all your learning materials, books, notes visible and accessible in your workspace. Lower the activation energy for good habits.
Make it super easy to start the good stuff. Bypass willpower.
Exactly. Automate good decisions through environmental design.
Okay, we've covered what to learn, planning, practice, deep comprehension, skill stacking, and optimizing our environment. But Hollins dedicates a whole chapter just to managing your expectations. Why is that so critical after covering all these powerful techniques?
It's critical because it addresses the core reason why so many people give up. The fantasy is that learning a new skill is extraordinarily easy. We see highlight reels, not the struggle. So when reality hits, when it's harder or slower than expected, people get discouraged and quit.
The instant gratification mindset bites us.
Totally. Hollins uses the metaphor. The elevator to success is out of order, but the stairs are always available. You have to expect the climb, except that progress is usually slow, steady, linear, not some overnight miracle. Hard work is an input, a necessary element, but it doesn't guarantee immediate results or entitlement. Understanding this builds resilience.
He uses a couple of really vivid analogies to hammer this home, right? About the effort involved.
Yes, really powerful ones. The 15-mile hike analogy. One person thinks it'll be a breeze, shows up unprepared, wrong shoes, no water, ignores storm clouds, and fails.
Maybe it's a big challenge.
Right. The other person knows it's tough, prepares meticulously practiced heights, proper gear, respects the conditions, and succeeds. It's simple. Underestimating the journey leads to failure. Realistic preparation and accepting the difficulty lead to success. Same with learning a skill.
What's the other analogy?
The website builder analogy. One person invests significant time, money, effort to really learn coding. They build a professional, flexible website from scratch, gaining true expertise. The other takes the easy route, a free template site like Wix. Quick, no sacrifice, but the result is limited, non-customizable.
You get what you put in?
Precisely. The payoff for the first person's sacrifice is huge. Deep skill, flexibility, becoming a more complete, practiced, and expert human being. Hollins sums it up. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Real mastery demands investment and embracing the difficulty.
Okay, so be realistic about the effort. He also talks about embracing constant confusion, which sounds unpleasant.
It is unpleasant, but unavoidable and crucial to accept. Confusion and frustration are not signs you're failing. They are inherent parts of learning something truly new. Michael Gelb called it confusion endurance.
The ability to stick with it even when things are messy and unclear?
Exactly. It's like standing in that cluttered room you mentioned. Total chaos. It feels overwhelming, paralyzing. Confusion endurance is the stamina to just start sorting one thing, then another, trusting that clarity will emerge from the mess if you persist. Don't wait for inspiration. Just wade into the confusion and start working. Embrace the discomfort as necessary for growth.
Okay, endure the confusion. And the final mindset shift he discusses seems paradoxical for someone aiming for expertise. You know nothing.
Yeah, it sounds odd, but it's drawn from the Zen concept of beginner's mind. It means approaching things with openness, eagerness, and lack of preconceptions.
Even if you are an expert.
Especially if you think you are. It's not about devaluing your knowledge. It's about putting your ego aside, staying humble, willing to listen, open to new information, recognizing you don't know everything. It prevents complacency.
Why is that so vital, especially for experienced people? Don't experts know things?
They do, but expertise can create blind spots. The beginner's mind empowers you to ask dumb questions. The basic, clarifying questions that challenge assumptions everyone else takes for granted. When you're deeply experienced, it's easy to miss the obvious or operate on outdated ideas.
Like looking at something familiar with fresh eyes.
Exactly. Slowing down, questioning the basics, paying attention to what you've ignored that can lead to breakthroughs, even for veterans. It stops the curse of knowledge from closing you off. It might mean actively seeking criticism or engaging with new ideas as a complete novice.
His own driving lesson story is a brutal but perfect example of this, right? Uncovering blind spots through ruthless self-assessment.
Oh, it's fantastic. Raw, honest, memorable. He describes his near disaster while learning to drive. The instructor says merge left. He signals, checks his shoulder, but skips the rear view mirror blind spot check, thought it was redundant.
Oh.
Big honk. Almost hits a car. Panics, swerves violently right, nearly hits another car, floors the gas instead of the brake, almost runs a red. All in like 10 seconds.
Oh, a cascade of errors.
Caused by one initial blind spot and then panicked reactions. But the brilliant part is how he dissects it afterwards, using those non-judgmental questions, really embodying the you-know-nothing mindset. What was the cause? Missed blind spot check. Mistaken strategy. Skip the mirror check. Mistaken execution. Violent swerve. Wrong pedal, etc. Yes. What should have happened? Check mirror. Smoother reaction. Covered brake. Warning signs missed. Lack of confidence. Skipping the check. Wrong assumptions. Lane was clear. Thought he was competent enough. Revealed blind spot skills needed. Awareness. Footwork. Panic control. Character trait holding back. Hubris, not diligently applying basics. How to do differently. Strict three-point merge. Control steering. Adjust seat. Advice from this. Be aware. Control emotions. Fear causes accidents.
That is ruthless self-assessment. No excuses.
Exactly. Owning it completely without justification. That's the essence of the you-know-nothing mindset. Constantly seeking what you missed, where you can improve, no matter your current level. That unflinching honesty is how true mastery happens. Tag outro.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into The Science of Rapid Skill Acquisition by Peter Hollins. It's crystal clear that learning isn't just about showing up. It's a deliberate, strategic, often uncomfortable process, but one that, when you really engage with it, can fundamentally reshape your life and what you're capable of.
Absolutely. The real lasting value of Hollins' work here is how incredibly actionable it all is.
Yeah.
You listening now, you have this comprehensive toolkit, shifting you from just passively consuming to actively, intentionally learning. Just think about what we've covered.
Yeah, like...
You've learned to deconstruct big skills into small pieces, using that 80-20 rule to focus your effort. You know how to plan your practice with deliberate, interleaved, and spaced repetition techniques, focusing on frequency, not just duration.
Right. Those practice methods were eye-opening.
You can embrace problem-based learning, letting real challenges drive your skill development. You have tools like elaborative interrogation, the Feynman Technique, Bloom's Taxonomy to deepen your comprehension, hunting down those blind spots relentlessly.
And cultivating curiosity.
Yes. Cultivating curiosity as your fuel. Understanding how to strategically stack your skills to create unique value. How to consciously design your social environment, ditching negativity, seeking role models, mentors, supportive groups.
And even designing your physical space.
Exactly. Curating your physical surroundings to make good habits easy and bad habits hard, getting around the limits of willpower. It's a whole system.
Ultimately, what Hollins seems to be teaching us is that the why behind all these methods is really about personal empowerment, isn't it? These aren't just abstract ideas.
Which really brings us to a final question for you, the listener. What is one skill you've always wanted to learn, something that's been on that maybe someday list? And how will you apply just one of these principles we've talked about, maybe deconstruction, maybe spaced repetition, maybe finding a mentor, maybe just deciding to endure the confusions? How will you use just one thing to start your deep dive into learning that skill starting today?